This Mamar was delivered by the Rebbe on Shabbos Mamar Shelach, Beverages Tammuz, the Shabbos that we bring blessing for the new month. The year was 1983. Lehavin Inyan Hanesachim. To understand the notion of the libations, or blessed beverages, Hamavur l'Rishayna b'Parshasenu, which is talked about and explained for the very first time in this week's Torah portion. The Inyan HaKarbonos, the idea and notion of offerings, Kvar Nizker b'Parshias Shlifnezer, have already been mentioned at great length in the previous Torah portions. In fact, the whole book of Leviticus is primarily with a focus on Karbonos. V'hachidush b'Parshasenu, so what is added to the rubric of offerings in this week's Torah portion is Inyan Hanesachim, is this notion of libations, of liquid beverages which are poured on the Mizbeach. Shemakrivim im hakarban, that together with the offering, we bring yayin and shemen and selis, that there's also wine and there's oil and fine flour. V'tzarech lahavin mahu inyanim. So this needs to be understood. We spent many a Mamar talking about the concept of karbonos, of offerings, what the offerings represent. We've never talked about these beverages. Why does the karban need to have some kind of liquid that's poured on the Mizbeach along with the karban? V'gam, another thing that would be really nice to understand is the kesher le'inyan haknisa la'aretz. There seems to be a link drawn between these blessed beverages and entering the land of Israel. D'chsiv, as it is written in the verse, Ki savayu el eretz meishvei sechem, when you come to the land of your dwellings, which is euphemistic reference to our homeland Eretz Yisrael, oz davke hu inyan hanesachim. That's when the libations begin. So that is to say, in the Midbar, in the desert, they brought karbanos, they brought offerings, they had a mishkan, but there were no libations. The libations only begin upon the entrance to the land of Israel. And presumably then, the reason it's mentioned in Parsha Shlach is after God tells the Jewish people, Bamidbar hazeh yiplu pigrechem, you're all going to drop dead. You're staying here in the desert. You will not go to the land of Israel. It's only a new generation, your children. They will go to the land of Israel. So Hashem comforts the Jewish people by speaking to them about going to Israel. You will go, just not you. This will happen, just not now. And we hear about the notion of challah, as we learned yesterday, which is when you come to Eretz Yisrael. We hear about the day of libations, which will be after we come to Eretz Yisrael. But the question is, if this is an integral part of offerings, A, why wasn't it mentioned up until now? B, why only when we come to the land of Israel? Well, and to explain this, maybe Belukut Torah, es Mamar Azal, the Alter Rebbe advances in his Mamarim of Likutei Torah, a enigmatic teaching of our sages. Shemimenu, it's from this enigmatic statement, Efshar lahavin, it's possible to understand Mahu Inyan Hanesachim. Now, this statement of our sages is not an overt and open commentary on the concept of libations. It doesn't say, here's what libations represent, this is what they mean, and that's why they should be brought. The Gemara, the Medrash makes a statement which on the surface is very hard to understand. But since it speaks of or alludes to the concept of libations, if we'll understand this statement of our sages, we will have clarity with regard to the Nesachim. So here's the statement. Kol ha'koira kriyashma b'lo tefillin, anybody who recites the Shema in the morning. Now the Shema is supposed to be recited within the first third of the day, and depending on when day begins, the time of Shema will be ending sooner. So now in the summer, when day begins very early, day breaks like, 4 o'clock, 3:45. So now, by the time 9:27 comes around, Zman Krishma has already expired. You talk about the winter, well, there are shorter days, so you have less time to play with, but also the day begins much later. So here in Toronto, Zman Krishma could go to, 10 after 10, sometimes it's even the quarter after 10. But this is the sliding scale of Zman Krishma, because it depends on the timely hours. We always take the day divided into 12 increments, and then the first third is when you have to say Krishma. So ideally, the mitzvah of Shema should be fulfilled when a man is wearing his tefillin. And it says, Kol hakoyra Krishma b'loi tefillin, a person who would recite the Shema verses, but he would not be wearing his tefillin, ki'ilu hikriv oila b'loi mincha. It's like bringing a scent offering without the accompanying meal offering, without the fine flour that should have been there. Zevach, like bringing an offering. A zevach oftentimes refers to a shlomim, where the mizbeach has part, and then those who brought the offering also eat some of that meat. So you bring a zevach b'lei nesachim, without the sacred or blessed beverages which are supposed to be poured along with the offering. The mizem muvan, from this is understood, she'inyan hakarbanos, that the idea of offerings, oila, v'zevach, these are names which represent karbanos in general. Hu k'may krishma. So if somebody would like to know, so what's a karban like? Well, from this statement of our sages, the answer would be, it's like reciting Shema. And what are nesachim like? What are the libations like? Oh, well, from this statement we come out with, they're just like tefillin, which doesn't really make sense to us. Why are tefillin beverages? And why is reading Shema an animal offering? But clearly that's what our sages said. So once we'll understand why an offering is like Shema, and then we can understand why tefillin is like a libation, then we'll understand this whole thing will all make sense to us. So that's the premise here, is that in order to understand this seemingly strange reality, which it flies in the face of much of what we've learned up until this point, but in order to understand this, we have a statement of our sages. And once we'll understand that statement of our sages, then we'll be able to come back, and the rest of the pieces of this puzzle will come together. The Hine, Gam Krishma, V'gam Tefillin, Shtehen, Hin Mitzvahs B'Torah. Both reciting the Shema in its timely allotment, as well as wearing tefillin on a daily basis, both of these are biblical commandments in the Torah. If you speak about them not from a contentful perspective, or the details of what it actually is, both are a mitzvah. That's the common denominator. But if you speak about the details, so Kriya Shema represents Kabbalah's oil, represents the idea of accepting the yoke, fulfilling the will of Hashem. It represents, in fact, the idea of Mesiras Nefesh, total self-abnegation, the willingness or the circumstances in which a person would perhaps pay the ultimate price to demonstrate his love and loyalty to Hashem. So that's what the Pasuk Rishon, that's what the first verse of the Shema represents. Well, that's not what the whole Shema is about. The Shema talks about various mitzvahs. We hear about the mitzvah of mezuzah, we hear about the mitzvah of Torah study, and then in the second portion of Shema, we hear about punishment and reward to some degree. So the Rebbe says all of this follows the first verse. The first verse of Shema sets the tone for the essential message, the motif, and the theme of the concept of Kriya Shema, namely Kabbalas El Malchus Shemayim. We accept God as our sovereign. So what God says we will do, because He's our sovereign. And then there's this notion that because God is our sovereign, not only will we do what He says, but we will pay any price in order to do what He says, because it's so important to us. And everything else is just a detail from that. There's a famous statement of our sages, why is the Shema read in its appropriate order, in the order where there's Parsha Rishona, the first portion of Shema, followed only afterwards by the second portion? And the Gemara in Brachos answers, first, a person should accept upon himself the yoke of heaven, which is a euphemism for the notion of accepting God as sovereign, that if Hashem says we must do, and only afterwards yikabel alav el mitzvahs, only afterwards you fulfill the yoke of the mitzvahs. V'hainu, this says then, that Kriya Shema inyanai haratzoi, that Kriya Shema represents a spiritual yearning or a rush forward. This craving or desire to leave behind the pedestrian, mundane, and ordinary everyday reality, to yearn for something larger, greater, and bigger. It's a halah mulmata l'mayla. It's a person who's feeling a profound discomfort with the present reality and seeks something greater. And that's the idea of Mesiras Nefesh. Mesiras Nefesh is a person who says, I don't care about this life that I'm living now, or the things that comprise my present existence. I'm looking to go beyond this. I'm looking to leave it all behind. I'm looking to become part of something which is so much vaster and larger, so much more impressive. And that's the idea of Mesiras Nefesh. A person says, these ethos, these ideas that I believe in, they're so valuable, they're so meaningful, they're so eternal, that I'm ready to set aside ephemeral life. Forget about the here and now. So I won't eat, so I won't drink, so I won't even be in a physical or corporeal sense. But I'll be part of something that's far beyond what we can imagine. Mesiras Nefesh. Masha'enkin Inyan HaTefillin, when we talk about tefillin, however, this represents the idea of Kiyum HaMitzvahs B'maisa B'Poel. That represents actually fulfilling mitzvahs. So the most famous answer I get from people who don't want to put on tefillin when I ask them to please put on tefillin is, Rabbi, I'm a Jew in my heart. I'm a Jew in my heart. I feel very Jewish. I'm very proud to be Jewish. Or sometimes they'll just say, I'm fine. I'm fine. What do they mean when they're fine? I never asked them if they're fine. I asked them to put on tefillin. They'll say, I'm fine. I'm fine with my Judaism. I feel good about being Jewish. I think that's what they mean. Why would they tell me if they're not hungry or if they had a good night's sleep? Presumably, I'm asking about tefillin, so their response is, I'm fine. I'm fine. My Judaism's fine. Well, then why, let's do a mitzvah. Well, it's not important to do it. If to do a mitzvah, we're just wrapping leather, what does it mean? I have the feelings inside. Now, the interesting thing is, Hukshu Kala Teira Kula. The whole Torah is in some way likened and equal to the mitzvah of tefillin. Even the mitzvah of Torah. It's all like tefillin. B'zeu gam masha tefillin he miloshen toifel klicheres. The word tefillin has a number of different meanings associated with it. One of them is the idea of connection. Ha-toifel klicheres means when a person bonds together two different pieces of pottery. And you do so obviously by using maybe soft clay or pottery and eventually having all that baked or fired together. So in other words, the toifel lashon cheres, which is to add pottery or to thicken the layers of pottery, is miloshen tefila v'hischabros. It comes from the notion of bonding and connecting. It comes from this idea of being of attachment. So therefore, tefillin, which represent all the mitzvahs, because you ask a person, it's not only tefillin, usually when he says, I'm fine, he says, I'm fine about everything. So let's eat matzah, let's keep Shabbos, let's have a mezuzah. I'm fine, he says, I'm fine. It's in my heart, I'm fine. But that's not so fine, because Hashem doesn't ask for it to remain in the heart, He asks for us to do it in action. So just like the husband that would tell his wife, no, I can't take the garbage out. I love you, honey, but no garbage. I don't do garbage. And I can't do any of these things you ask me to do. I can't help you at all, of course not. But I love you. That doesn't work. Well, the truth is that a Yiddishkeit which is only emotionally based doesn't work either. At least not the way it's supposed to. V'zeu gam masha tefillin. Sorry. So k'mosha mitzvahs she'en yanim hu miloshen tzavtza v'chibur. This is very much like the idea of mitzvah itself, which mitzvah comes from the terminology of connection. Connection. Tzavtza v'chibur. So the idea of tzavtza v'chibur means a link, a bond, and a connection. V'zeu gam masha inyan tefillin hu hamshacham u'mayla l'mato. This is the idea then. Once we've established that tefillin becomes the face or facade for mitzvahs in general, just like the name tefillin means toifel, which means connection or bonding, and the name mitzvah also means link and relating and bonding together. So the idea of the tefillin is the hamshacha. It represents actualization, taking a lofty and very much vaunted idea and bringing it down into a concrete reality. The Av Shagam B'Tfilin Ksuvis Parshas or Krishma, even though one could argue, well, what is the content of Tefillin? What is the meaning of Tefillin? If you would open the Tefillin and read the verses, read the scripture, what would you find? You find Krishma. You'll find the Shema. But you just said Shema represents that incredible, powerful yearning. And putting on tefillin represents actualizing it. But putting on the tefillin is putting on those verses. It is the idea of Mesiras Nefesh. And that's true. But the tefillin are not just comprised of the Torah portions. They also include Yesh Bahem Gam Ritzuas. They also include straps. Those straps, you strap it down, tie it down, bring it down. That's what the tefillin represents. This is why the mitzvah of tefillin also includes the notion of intention of heart, the meditation of heart. As the Magen Avraham says, that when your person puts on tefillin, they have to have the right ideas, or else a part of the mitzvah is missing, which is different from the general notion of kavanah. A person should have kavanah. He should do things intentfully. We should do things mindfully. But what if he did a mitzvah, he didn't do it mindfully? It's not missing in the mitzvah. It's just this general idea that you're not behaving in a mindful fashion. But there are two mitzvahs where the intention is actually a part of the mitzvah. And the mitzvah is tefillin, and even more so, the mitzvah of sitting in the sukkah. Because sukkah says Laman Yedu, that you should know what this is all about. But with tefillin, there's this idea of this feeling. So the feeling, the tefillin necessitate the feeling. It's a part of the mitzvah. It's shibud alev hameich. The tefillin is supposed to represent actual subservience, where I say, I'm devoting my emotions, I'm committing my intellect to God. Why is that necessary? Because Teichen Inyan Tefillin, the real meaning behind tefillin is lahamshich. It's to draw forth. It's to actualize. It's to take shibud halev. It's to take this dedication of heart and mind, of emotion and intellect, and to bring it forth, lamata, to bring it down, if you will, the gufa adam, in the body, in the corporeal reality of a person. Just like we can understand or identify this very, very basic and essential difference between Kriyishma and Tefillin, that Kriyishma represents the yearning, and Tefillin represents the actualization. So too, says the Rebbe, is the chilik between karbonos, offerings, and nesachim, and the libations. Dehine, teichen inyan ha-karbon, the meaning of a karbon, hu kishmai. You want to know what it is? Well, like a lot of things in Hebrew, just look at the name. What's the name? The name karbon, if you dissect it, it means the word kiruv. It comes from the terminology of closeness. Ukipashtas ha'inyan. This could even be understood on a very literal or practical level. Shenetlim davar mibachutz, something which is not holy, not special, not sacred. It's like outside there. You dedicate it for the purpose of worshiping God. You make it that it should be lihiyas korban l'Hashem. And that this idea, which we could even physically and literally see was something which was ordinary or mundane, was brought into the orbit of holiness. This could even be understood on a more profound level, like this Zoharic statement, Sheraza de Kurbana, Oila Adaraza de Inseif, that the mystery of the Korban penetrates or is able to literally reach the mystery of the oneness of God, as is explained in the Mamarim of Basi Lagani of the Frierdiker Rebbe. The Inyan HaKorban Hu HaLechem. The idea of Korban is also euphemistically referred to as bread. Like it says in the verse, and this verse appears in Torah numerous times, is Korbani Lachmi Leishai. My Korban, my fire offering, my bread, my fire offering. My bread, God says. What does it mean calling Korban bread? God doesn't need breakfast, he's missing cornflakes. What does it mean he needs bread? It means the Geshem Sha'al Lechem Lemata. In Yonei Lechaber Es HaNeshama Ves HaGuf. Just like bread, which is sometimes seen as a euphemism for eating in general, is required and necessary to keep body and soul together. As people might say, I'm famished. I feel like I'm dying. I need some food. And then after I have some food, I say, oh, now I feel better. Now I've caught my breath. You look at the body before a person eats and after a person eats, he doesn't even get any thicker, any fatter because he ate. It's kamei gufay Adam Arishan. Talk about the body of Adam Arishan, the first body of a human being that was formed, so to speak, by the hand of God. Mikol Makim tzarechul neshama. That body is just a body, and a body without any kind of soul or spirit is a corpse. Adam Arishan was also once a corpse. Kameshikosov, like it says, Vayipach ba'ap of Nishmas Chaim. We're the only creatures, and that's a subject for another day, that Hashem created body and soul separately. He created a body, and then took this dormant body, this corpse, if you will, and breathed life into it. So that's how we started in the very beginning. That's how human life began. In order to keep body and soul together, which is what ensures that we are not corpse and ghost, means body and soul that have gone separate ways, chas v'shalom, but rather a human being, a living human being, which means that body and soul are fused together. In order to keep that going, tzarich inyan halechem. You cannot stay alive without food. It just doesn't work. The reason is, the bread is certainly on a lower level in the spiritual scale of things than a human being is. However, precisely because it is lower, that's precisely why yesh be'eres elyonim yeser. That's why it contains very, very powerful, very lofty spiritual energy. Kinoida, as is known in the famous mashal, the famous metaphor, shekol hagavaya yeser yered lamata yeser. The higher the original vantage point, the greater the fall, and naturally the greater the impact. And so divinity, which has to fall into a reality that seems separate and apart from God, if it comes from a loftier place, will end up seeming a whole lot less spiritual. And the bread, it does seem less spiritual, it's less alive. The bread comes from vegetation. Vegetation can't move. You don't see any vibrancy in it. It grows very slowly. It's alive at some point, but you don't see it. Therefore, precisely because the bread falls so low, that's why it contains such lofty divine energies, and that's why it can serve as the mechanism or the convention that unites body and soul. So just as we might understand this within the frame of some kind of literal spiritual description of human life, so too we can understand that this is a reflection of yet a higher reality. The Maha Neshama Memala Saguf, just as the soul fills the body, Kacha Kadosh Baruch Hu Memala Soilam, there's this idea that divinity is like a soul for a world that otherwise seems dormant or dead. She'inyan HaKarbonos, that the idea of the Karban is the Lechem, it's the sustenance, it's the bread, which serves, it's Mechaber, Es HaOilam Im HaKadosh Baruch Hu, it unites the world with God. So if a Karban is called Lachmi, just like bread keeps body and soul together, in order for our world to be a vibrantly godly place, what's necessary? Karbanos. Of course, you'll ask, how is the world alive today? And the answer is, it's kind of sleeping. Nobody eats when they're in the middle of sleeping, but they're also not as awake and not as vibrant. And the world isn't as vibrant as it should be. The world is a place which seems far more devoid of godliness than in yesteryear, because we have no karbanos. And here then, we can see the difference between the karban and between the libation. The linking, the connection of the world with God, so this happens on two levels. Everything has an inner esoteric reality and a superficial reality. There is the inner rhythm of life, and then there's what we're going to call the external reality of life or living. We'll explain this in a moment. The Hinei Chsiv, behold, it is written in the vision of Ezekiel, which describes the divine reality in God's, so to speak, interaction with this world. It says, V'hachayis rotzi v'shoiv, that the angels that Ezekiel saw were advancing and retreating, were rushing forward, and then they were kind of collapsing and being restored back to the original vantage point. The Kavur became that's explained in many places, that the vibrancy or divine lifeblood of the world is always in a state of flux. It never remains in the same spot. And this is, for example, mirrored in the human experience. Every one of us wants to leave home, get away, do something exciting, and at the same time, all we want is just to be relaxed. We just want to be home. We just want to be serene and peaceful and calm. And then we're looking for a little excitement. And then we want to run away from the excitement. The excitement is too excitement, too much. Give me some, just leave me alone. Let me be calm and peaceful. And then I'm so bored, so I can't be calm and peaceful. I got to go look for something to do again. And that's how human moods function. And the human moods are a reflection of how life itself functions. So the inyan haratzoi shayach lechitzonius achayis. That drive for excitement, and people looking for something to do and finding fulfillment in activity, that's the superficial reality. Inyan hashuv, when is a person really most themselves? You have that downtime, that quiet time. When a person feels restored, feels enough of the hubbub and the tumult. The person is just calm, and you kind of feel closest to who you really are. You just feel that you are, and that's called pnimius achayis. That's the inner esoteric track of life itself. This then is the difference between offerings and between libations. The inyan akarbanos hu haratzoi. Karbanos represent that rush forward, the halah mulmata lamaila, the craving, the yearning that we as humanity experiences for God. The inyan hamesiras nefesh, the willingness, the readiness to leave it all behind. Mashenkin inyan hanesachim, fire goes up. It's a fire offering. But nesachim, the libation, these blessed beverages, what way does that go? No fire involved. You're not boiling the wine, you're pouring. You don't pour up, you can only pour down. That's the idea of hamshacha. That means bringing something milmaila from a higher level, lamata, which is like the tefillin that we talked about. It's actualization, which is the hamshacha of pnimius achayis. And we're kind of running out of time, but at this point it becomes now very clearly understood the link and connection of Pashas Nesachim to going into Eretz Yisrael. Why? Because think about it. When the Jewish people were in the Midbar, they were muvdalim, umufrashim and ha'ilam. They weren't involved in ordinary, regular, everyday life. They were living an existence that was totally apart, surrounded by clouds of glory, sustained by the manna. They're in the desert. And that was the third day. This was the generation of incredible knowledge. Sheba'olam machshava. They lived, as it's brought down in Kisvei Arizal, in the world of thought. They were the theorists. They lived in some lofty vantage point, and on some lofty theoretical plane, they were perfect Ovdei Hashem. They were doing exactly what God wanted. However, it was Lo Ba'olam hadibur. They did not talk the talk, and they certainly did not walk the walk. It wasn't b'maisa. Because factually, God said, do A, B, and C, and they said, no, we'd rather X, Y, and Z. Oz nemar inyan karbanos. What could they relate to in the midbar? Karbanos, yearning, craving, that they got. The inyan hanesachim, the idea of these libations, these blessed beverages, hakosharim hamshacha lemata dafka, which represents actualization, b'china shuv, bringing it down. This was nemar lehem. It was said to them before they would come to Eretz Yisrael. But it wasn't fulfilled. It says we should be one nation, a nation that embodies and reflects the oneness of God, ba'aretz, in artzius, in the material reality. As the Alter Rebbe famously explains, lahamshach mesiras nefesh, the echad. Echad is the climax of the first verse of Shema. It represents the highest level of mesiras nefesh. And the goy echad ba'aretz means to take that echad, to bring it into aretz, to bring it into earthliness, to bring it into the everyday life living in a land. That means goy echad ba'aretz. V'lachein nikra Eretz Yisrael. That's why it's called the land of Israel. B'shem Eretz Meishvei Seichem. It's called the land of your dwellings. What does it mean, Moishav? We don't call it here Eretz Canaan, the land of Canaan, as it was once known. We identify it as the idea of Hisyashvus, Eretz Meishvei Seichem. The idea that you'd be able to sit, to settle. The idea that you'd be able to actualize, to bring forth. That's the idea of sitting down. When a person sits down, they actually become lowered. And also you're at peace. So sit down, stay a while. Actualization. It shouldn't be fleeting. It should be with a sense of permanence, which this is the idea of the Yishuv. In the balance of the Mamar, the Rebbe explains the idea of oil, wine, and fine flour. But we're out of time. And the bottom line, we should be mamshech. We should draw forth and actualize all the hamshachas. And we should merit Yetz Hashem to see karbanos and nesachim in the Beis Hamikdash with the coming of Mashiach b'mheira u'biyamenu. Amen.
Fine flour is not great. That's not great.